Thank you very much.
My first question, quickly, why were you late?
Yeah, I was insisting to a number of undocumented workers that the Writers Guild Theater was on Cannon approaching Third, which was the directions I was given. But I appear to have been mistaken. I'm terribly, terribly sorry.
All right, well, I'll launch into it. You, I think, talk very sort of, how do I want to say this? You have like kind of an idiosyncratic writing process that I've heard you talk about a lot. And I was hoping to kind of, with your permission, kind of go beyond a little bit the things that I've heard you
Usual
say.
bullshit?
Well, it's not bullshit, but I mean, the first time I heard it, I was fascinated. The second time, less fascinated. And now I want
I got you.
to. Okay, so here's what the only time and this is you talking in the New Yorker recently about your writing process. The only time I'll think about the work is when I'm working. Anything you're thinking about when you're not in the act of writing is probably useless. So I'm thinking, okay, so does David mean when I'm in the car and I have a notepad and I get an idea for something, a character, let's say, and I jot it down, am I just still driving? Am I not writing? I guess is my question.
When you do it?
How about, well, yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Because I don't. You can't hear me? I don't write things down in the car. I don't. I mean, I don't. I am a sociopath, and I can very rarely be relied upon to tell the truth. But I was telling the truth. When I'm not writing, I don't think about writing.
And was that something you had to like train yourself to do? I mean, because I mean, your work is obviously, you know, I mean, full of depth and characters that are very complex, and their motivations are multifaceted, multi-layered. I would think they swim around in your head even when you're not in the act of writing.
Well, they don't, and that's a decision that because when they're swimming around in my head and I'm not writing, they're not swimming around. I am attached to them trying to swim, and I'm old, I'm overweight, and I'm a big drag on the characters, you know, if you think about what I'm trying to say, the thing is that our everything that you think about writing when you're not writing is ego-based. You are connected with it in a way that you are properly not connected with it when you're actually giving yourself to the characters. You know, if let's say we're talking about Deadwood for just as a Sisyphean exercise, and you know, you don't see me up there on the screen. You see the characters, and therefore all of the egoist associations well, let me say that'll be funny. I mean, you see what I mean? It's not the character. And so because I write so much, I try to work, you know, a number of hours every day, 7 days a week. And a lot of people would find that distracting, but I'm so evolved that it doesn't bother me. So I've tried to train myself in that regard, because I find that what I think about my characters when I'm not writing is wrong. I mean, it isn't the character. And so as a discipline, I try to renounce it.
So when I mean, how many hours a day do you write? 7 days a week?
You know, 4.
Okay, but I mean, it's ritual based. In other words, it's a part of each day.
I mean, what I do when we're shooting, you know, I work. You know, we get to work 6:30, and if we're not rehearsing or if I'm not cutting, I'm writing, and you know, that's how the day goes.
Okay. another quote, and I think this is, you've talked, maybe some people in here are familiar with William James and I guess his influence on you. And this is, I guess, well, let me read the whole quote. This is you. I try consciously to frustrate the impulse to think about a scene before I sit down to it. Because you know the highfalutin expression, you can't think your way to right action. You can only act your way to right thinking. Which I think is what you've been talking about, I guess, right?
Yeah. I want you to take as many pictures as you want to take, and then I want you to stop taking pictures. Come on. Come on. Come on. Here's me holding my right breast. Or is that my left? Okay. You can't think your way to right action. You can only act your way to right thinking. There's something called the James Lang theory of emotion, because James and the other guy, I guess, published more or less simultaneously. And the idea is that thought is the result of behavior. And one, if you're going to try and prove that, the example that I always use until I bore people to stupefaction is if you say the one thing you know about yourself. Exercise is a recurring obsession with me, which is an alternative to actually exercising. And so what I think is I'm too far gone. You know, the arteries are shot anyway. Who am I kidding? Bah, 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 bah. So all that is an action, which is the action of not exercising. And in fact, my thoughts are subsequent to the action of not exercising. Now I jump in the pool. 8 times out of 10, there's water in it. Every time there's water in it and I start swimming, by the time I'm halfway across the pool, what I'm thinking is, some people are born athletic, and no matter how long they lay off, they pick it right back up, and that happens to be the kid. Which is simply to say that the function of the ego is to defend the present state of behavior, whatever that state is. And so if my action is exercising, what I now think about myself is, you are an exercising machine. And so that's the sort of aphorism there. You can't think your way to right action, you act your way to right thinking. So what I do is, in terms of writing, is I write. And by writing, I find that my ego is suppressed as long as I'm writing, and I'm able to give myself to the characters without the appended weight of my ego in a way that I cannot do when I'm not actually writing, so I don't write. So I don't think about writing when I'm not doing it. Does that make sense?
How do you do it though?
Take a picture. Take a picture. Come on. Oh, you put it away. Okay.
But how do you do that in a medium like television that's so sort of unforgiving about deadlines and wants you to hit certain beats all the time?
I prepare myself to be unforgiving. You know, I don't make deadlines. I don't publish a script before we start to shoot. I don't do it. And it's not the end of the world. You know, it's like the Hong Kong tailor. You know, you go to the Hong Kong tailor and you get fitted for the suit. And you're thinking, well, that's rather a dashing outfit. When can I have it? And he says 6 months. You say, 6 months? I need it tonight. He said, all right, tonight. and you know, studios are like that. What they want is work that the people will watch more or less. And so, you know, what they try and do is scare you and say, well, you know, you don't get to play unless you do it this way. And then if they see that the work, that people like it, they say, it's a mark of this network that we are brave enough to allow a certain breadth and even an idiosyncrasy in work method.
So on Deadwood, what was the shootings? I mean, when you were doing, I assume, NYPD Blue, it's an 8-day per episode, so to speak, schedule.
So to speak, yeah.
What is it on Deadwood? Or was it, I guess? I have to ask you that question. We'll
Yeah.
get that out of the way now. What happened?
As to the shooting schedule, we were known to shoot 15, 16 days. Maybe that's why we're speaking about it in the past tense. It took what it took.
So the network, basically, HBO never knew, kind of.
Yeah, why do they have to know? I mean, HBO likes you to shoot 6 to 8 years before they actually air the thing. What difference does it make?
So that was never an issue then, with them. Okay.
I mean, I'm exaggerating, but the truth is that HBO likes you to have the whole season shot before you air. And that isn't why. I mean, it's just, the thing is that all the stuff I'm so conscious now, at lunch today I'm telling a story and I see everyone, and it's a big table, there's like 10 people at the table, and everybody's eyes glaze over and they look at each other like, here's story 127, So I'm so aware of the fact that I'm getting on in years. Another proof of which is I'm wearing green. I can't tell colors. I can't hear. I tell the same goddamn story every day. Anyway, this is an elaborate preface to the observation that I often quote a Taoist proverb, and I know I've quoted it before. I'm sorry. Which is, when the Tao is lost, men begin to speak of good and evil. So let's say that the Tao is effective storytelling. And let's say also that most storytelling is not effective. In the absence of effective storytelling, networks make you stick to schedules. If you're telling good stories, they find a way around it. So I try to stick with the Tao, and I let them worry about what they worry about. Where the Tao is the story.
Okay, I just want to ask you one question about Deadwood. And that is, and I should preface this by saying I'm getting a lot of email at work, and also letters in the mail.
Poor baby.
Yeah. That sort of suggest HBO has, made you, kind of a political prisoner practically, that they've taken away the show. And
What if they sent me the wrong directions?
the way it sort of the way it seems to have splintered out, kind of like, I mean, I don't so much want you to, talk about what happened, but just sort of where you are in terms of your relationship with the show and your relationship with your new show, who's, I don't think has a title, but...
John from Cincinnati.
Okay, sorry. But, I mean, I think you would say, okay, I see this in 4 chapters, 4 years. Now it's apparently going to be 3, which I don't necessarily think is a tragedy, which isn't to say anything about the show. I mean, I just think, there are a lot
We
of
all
stories
seem
to
to
tell.
be ambulatory, right?
Right. So where are you in terms of, your relationship with those characters, that show? I mean, are they sort of, okay, gotta move on?
Well, at the risk of asking to be believed, I try not to think about the characters when I'm not writing. And I'm not writing. And that is a simplifying discipline, because it trains me to accept the fact that there are things that I can control and things that I can't control. And my collaboration with HBO has been uniformly and without exception, a positive one. It's been a blessing to me to be able to do that show. I don't see too many others like it on other networks. That was HBO. So, and what elaborate combination of events made it possible for that show to go on is something that I never particularly concerned myself with. And by the same token, I'm not competent to assess what combination of circumstances appears today to have curtailed it. Here's what I'm doing now in terms of Deadwood. I'm editing, today I worked on the 9th episode. And I hope some of the people that I was working with, Regina and some other people, I think we helped the story. I think we helped the characters. I think we clarified a bunch, hi Elizabeth. I think we clarified a bunch of scenes. That's all I can do about Deadwood today. Mm-hmm. And here's how many people have seen Deadwood? Raise your hand. Okay. So here's the thing about Deadwood, and I hope you like it. And because otherwise it's pretty mean-spirited to come here and tell me you don't. So here's the thing. 1/3 of the episodes of Deadwood have never been seen by you all. And I want to tell you, because this is something that I do know about, because I've seen them, they're wonderful. And I think that I hope that it will be a great pleasure for you to watch them. And what would diminish that, I expect, as it would diminish the experience for me, when I'm working on the editing, and sometimes I'll think to myself, geez, that's a nice scene, boy, am I going to miss this. The boy, I'm going to miss it, takes me out of the scene. And I got plenty of time to miss it. But I only have a certain amount of time to work on the scene. And I would suggest that that's, as viewers, will be the same discipline for you. We were so privileged to do those episodes. And it was such an uplifting experience. And we felt more than we feel when we weren't working on them. And I think that that'll be available for each of you as a viewer. And I urge you not to deprive yourself of it. And that's why I'm reluctant to cast your experience of those episodes in the shadow of events which are still in the process of defining themselves. And one of the things one of the themes that has engaged my imagination and continues to engage it in the new writing that I'm doing, is the way that the future continuously reinterprets the meaning of the past. I had a little 3-decade-long flirtation with drug abuse. And when I was blessed to be relieved of that obsession, everything that had happened during that period took on a new meaning because of the blessing of having been relieved, and what appreciations I was able to bring to the present moment because of that change. And so that all of that is constantly being redefined by our present experiences. And your experience of the meaning of Deadwood may be contingent, to the extent you allow it to be, may become an allegory of the inevitable betrayal of the artist by the unfeeling corporate organism. You can let those episodes be that, and the theme is there. But Detroit is not Cleveland, folks, and the people in those two cities appreciate the difference, and you will be deprived. I'm paraphrasing badly. When Nick Carraway goes up the stairs when the first time he's in Gatsby's mansion, and he overhears, the first thing he hears Gatsby saying, Gatsby's on the phone, he says, well, if Detroit's his idea of a small town, he's not much use to us. And the thing is, just let it be Deadwood. Let it be itself, as opposed to what, you'll have plenty of time afterwards to think about, why worry about the fourth season? You haven't seen the third season, and God only knows what September will bring, or you get me.
In terms of what's your new project, and I don't know if you're working on, are you in the midst of writing that as you're editing these last Deadwood episodes?
We're getting ready to shoot it in July.
I've just read sort of the one-line description in the trades, I guess. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about it. And also, this is, I know like on NYPD Blue, you did a lot of work with Bill Clark before.
Yeah.
A lot of living with Bill Clark, a lot of living through Bill Clark or whatever. And then on Deadwood, maybe not living through. And then on Deadwood, you sort of surround, I don't know if it was a posse of bull riders and cowboy types. Now you entered this surfing culture.
They love to be called cowboy types.
Is this something now you're immersing yourself in? Because that is a whole other subculture as these other two.
Well, I try to meet as many people as I can who are connected with the work that I'm doing, and I have had the great pleasure of meeting a bunch of people who are surfer types and skateboard types and undocumented worker types, and because we're shooting around the Tijuana sloughs, it's the border between America and Mexico, and the materials engage a lot of that stuff. Deadwood is despite its surfeit of cowboy types, is about, it's the setting of things, but the setting is not the fullest definition of the materials, nor do I mean to imply that's what you were suggesting. That's a covert apology for saying types. And so in the same way, this is, this is to say, yes, to the extent that surfers are have a special sensibility, or the experience of surfing creates a special sensibility, it seems to me of the essence of my responsibility to experience that in every fashion short of proximity to the water. Jewish people usually have someone to do their physical living for.
Just one quick follow-up to that. So this is not based on the novels of Ken Nunn, or...
There's Ken Nunn right there, who is my collaborator, and who has agreed to live for me for the next 3 or 4 years.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about your relationship with, not relationship with money. Let me put it this way.
Transient.
So you come out here and you write an episode of Hill Street Blues, and it not only wins an Emmy, it wins a Humanitas Prize, which is a prize given out by the foundation, or I guess
Catholic Church.
Yeah, the late Father Elwood Kaiser. And you win $15,000 for this prize, which you spend on a racehorse.
The father insisted.
And I think that's kind of brilliant. Number one, because, you know, horse races are cool, horse racing is cool, but number two, like, you were starting out, I don't imagine you were making a ton of money at that point.
No.
Was it an act, so it seems like, you know, an act of
Little
kind of
perverse
irresponsible defiance, yeah, like kind of a screw you to, you know, success in a way.
Shook the church to its very foundation.
But as you started to make more and more money, I mean, how did you feel about that?
Listen, where there's a will, there's a way. I had pissed away millions and millions of dollars. There is not an amount of money that a writer can earn that I can't blow. And nobody says it's easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. But you persevere, you do what you can each day. And at the end of the year, you've pissed away, you know, a fortune.
But so am I reading too much into it to see it as like some sort of repudiation?
Yeah, well, you know, I've told this story elsewhere, but I will very briefly say that, you know, I hated that guy. Father Kaiser. I mean, I hated the idea of the church giving money to, you know, I said, this guy had some kind of covert in, you know, to get into the walled city, all of which had an element of truth to it, but was not his bottom line. And I was loaded all those years, you know, the second year I was out here, I won it again, you know, and I made it a point on the podium, standing next to Father Kaiser, to say, I just want you to know, with last year's money, I bought a racehorse. I'm going to do the same with this year's money. Aren't you proud of me? And, you know, I was trying to hurt him a little bit, and I've been abused in the ways that people often associate with priests, and so I'm sure that stream fed into it a little bit, you know, but I certainly wasn't abused by him. He was a nice guy, nice enough guy. He was ugly. He was an ugly human being. But I mean, you're gonna hold that? I mean, so anyways, years went by, and I guess I won it a few other times, and then I got sober, and I won it again, and I won it actually for an episode which involved pedophilia and some other stuff, and as you can tell, I don't rehearse the things I'm going to say. So I'm thanking them now at the Humanitas Award, and I'm looking at Father Kaiser, who I should observe at this point was, although he was every bit as ugly as he had been, his color wasn't very good. But anyway, I said, I'm grateful to have lived long enough to have come to understand that the shadow in which I felt I must live and my characters must move is cast by God's sheltering hand. And as I said it, what I realized was that the thing I'd always resented about Father Kaiser had nothing to do with what happened to me when I was a kid. He'd always had this look in his mug like he knew something about me that I didn't know about myself. And at that moment I realized that was what he knew. And a few months later I got a message from him. He was dying, which he was already ill when I, you know, at that ceremony, and he asked me to come and sit with him. And I did. And we held hands, and I told him about that I was working on this story. Deadwood was originally, as should be transparent to anyone who's seen it, originally set in ancient Rome at the time of Nero. And it was about city cops, and the first guy they arrest is St. Paul. And so I was telling him that because he was a Paulist father, and that pleased him, and he was so glad for a moment to be able to rise up out of his pain and to engage in that conversation. So I guess to the extent that I'm responsive to what you were saying about, sometimes there's a character in a Russian novel, who essentially tries to prove God, by shaking his fist at him, by taking the life of a stranger, an old woman. And I suppose there was some of that, going on. I should also say, however, that horses I've owned have won 2 Breeders' Cups. I have a horse running Monday in the Shoemaker Mile, $300,000 race. We're optimistic about his prospects, and despite all of those facts, I guarantee you that at the end of the year, I will have lost a fortune.
I did want to actually ask you about Barbaro. It's an amazing story, but
yeah.
I don't know how much time do we have? Are we all right?
90 minutes from when you began.
Okay, well, let's keep going. You've talked about your heroin use and alcoholism and being addicted to drugs. But
Some of those are associated.
but something else, if I'm not mistaken, that you've kind of, seems to me, beaten is obsessive compulsive disorder. You describe it, I guess, when you were young at Yale. I think you wrote the same 12 pages of a novel every day for a year.
Word for word.
You don't, let's see, you don't like to touch the mouse or the keyboard when you write, because that could also sort of trigger maybe some compulsive behaviors. How have you been able to be so productive at the same time? A friend told me that obsessive compulsive disorder is quite, all-consuming, and yet you've churned out quite a body of work at the same time.
Well, I wanted to. I wanted desperately to be in the world, and so I tried to figure out ways. The reason that I don't think about my writing when I'm not writing is because I obsess about it. From the time I was a little kid, I had to touch my pillow a certain number of times. I had to move my shoes a certain number of times. I had to tell my parents I loved them a certain number of times. My grandfather, in my imagination, whom I had been brought in to kiss when he was dead, used to take one step from his grave every night. And when he finally got to where I was, he would kiss me and then I would die. So I would keep him busy, I'd move in patterns and stuff. And all of that stuff, they find that people with those those are just that's just defective wiring, that's all it is. But when you're that wacky, those people are predisposed to be loaded, just because it's kind of a drag, all of that stuff. And, you wake up, you say, if this is as good as I feel today, So those things tend to compound themselves, so not only are you touching things a number of times, but the thing you're touching is a syringe, And, I believe if God is anywhere, He's everywhere. And therefore, if you ask Him for help and you do your part, you stay available to be helped, you'll get, you may not get help as you define help, but you will experience His presence. That may mean that you die screaming, that may mean that you die in an oven. So in terms of those obsessive patterns, I taught myself not to have access to, like if I write longhand, you don't want to look at what my writing looks like longhand. It's curves in on it, all this stuff. And then if I type and I make a mistake, I got to start the whole page over again. So there you go.
You mean like a misspelling or?
Yeah,
Oh.
anything. So that's funny. That's not funny. Funny is like Milton Berle. So then, with a computer, I can't use a computer, I don't know, I don't have any computer, I don't have a watch, I don't deal with the phone, which is why I didn't have, I couldn't call here because I threw the phone out of my car a number of years ago. Anyways, so I worked out this thing where I would dictate and someone would sit at the screen and the words would come up, and then I'd suggest if I want an amendment and they would just change them on the screen. Then the other thing, what's been a blessing for me is, I was a teacher before I came out here, and I write with students. I always have students with me while I'm working. And I try to explain what I'm doing, and so.
I'm sorry, when you say students, you mean students that?
Interns.
Okay,
And my colleagues, are there, and all of those things. The idea of obsessive compulsive disorder is predicated the same way junk is. You're alone. And every way that I can prove that I'm not alone, experientially, that I can act to testify to my belief that I'm not alone, that helps me.
So that means for you then, the writing it can't be solitary for them.
It's never solitary.
So you're never writing.
I'm never alone. And when I go, and then when the scene has been written, then I take it to the set. And I do it with the actors, and that's a blessing.
So, but, when you were writing on Hill Street Blues or writing on NYPD, were you alone, or were you writing, or was it?
Yeah, and I had, little tics of behavior. For example, when I was on Hill Street Blues, I lived in Las Vegas, and I would fly in every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd gamble all night, and I'd fly in at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd buy 48 cheese, whatever those things are, and I'd sit there and wait for the people to show up, the guards, and to change, and the people on the set, and then at night I'd fly back to Las Vegas.
So you were writing. In other words, you're waiting for everybody
You
to
seem
show.
perplexed.
Well, I'm just trying to picture it. So you're not like, because most writers on a lot are, I assume, in an office, a windowless
Right.
office or an office with a window. I don't know.
Yeah, I
And
was.
then there on a computer, and
My office tended to be a strange place. Not that it isn't still, but in those days, I would act out. I was constantly, if my boss and I would disagree, for example, on a speech or something of the sort, I might urinate on his typewriter. Most of the times he wasn't there, but there was the odd occasion, or I'd throw stuff out the window, the guys from St. Elsewhere, who were down below, said that in the afternoons when things usually got thick, they said they could never work because they were always waiting to see what was going to fly past their window. That was Tommy Fontana, yeah. Anyway, so anyway, yeah.
Because nowadays, if someone has some sort of personality disorder or psychological behavior that's
fair.
abnormal, they go on antidepressants. And I wondered what you think of that, a writer going on antidepressants.
I'm on antidepressants. My doctor says he has never had a patient on so many antidepressants, and also has never had a patient so dramatically under-medicated.
I was watching the pilot of Deadwood again, and there's with your commentary, and there's a scene where Swearingen and Farnham and one other person, I think, are basically conning the Garrett guy out of his gold collator. They're driving up the price, and you came on and you said that's why I was always such a lousy criminal. Every time I was involved in something like that kind of a con, I'd get a bright idea and I'd fuck the whole thing up.
One wrinkle too many.
So, I mean, you were involved in cons, or, I mean, what were you referring to, I guess, is my question.
I was referring to being a lousy criminal. You mean what kind of criminal?
I thought,
types of criminal activities?
Yeah.
Most. If I was a lousy I was terrible at violence. I was not an effectively violent person because usually I was so loaded, and I was always questioning the categories of the reality while I was committing the violence. And that makes for a busy palette. I'd be shooting at a guy, and I'd say, listen, look at this stupid bastard. He thinks I'm shooting at him. And of course I was. And a lot of times that cuts down on the amount of minutes available to escape. And once I was, having the writers here really intimidates me because I'm aware of the fact that I've told this story before. Well, that's too bad. So once I was in, I don't know where to begin this. Actually, so here's an instance. I don't know how many of you here are old enough to have taken Clear Light acid, but thank you. I was peripherally involved in that process, and I wound up getting incarcerated in Cuernavaca, although I was so inept that I wasn't incarcerated for the fundamental transgression. You use chloroform to change your gardamine tartrate into lysergic acid, and I was taking the chloroform. So I wound up passed out in a fountain in the village square, and they locked me up as a mendicant or something, and because they were trying to clean the streets up because they were having the Olympics. It was 1968. So I wound up locked up down there for a number of weeks, and as a result of a series of misunderstandings, they have to relocate the lab, which is I'm locked up down there. So now, in the aftermath of that, I wind up in law school. At Yale, because the draft, they instituted a draft lottery. When I was in Cuernavaca, I was supposed to be at the Writers' Workshop in Iowa. And so now it's either, and I get a low number, which means I'm eligible. So you can either go to medical school or law school. So I go to Yale Law School. So I'm there for like 20 minutes, and there's another acid casualty there, and we become fast friends, and we move into the Holiday Inn, and so we stay loaded for a period of time. And through a series of misunderstandings, this guy's wife catches him wrong. And so she leaves him. He goes to Chicago to try and bring her back. He asks me to watch his apartment. So I move out of the Holiday Inn. I'm in his apartment. His great-grandfather was in the Civil War. He's got his great-grandfather's Civil War sword, so I'm destroying his apartment with his great-grandfather's Civil War sword on acid. So, here comes the bubblegum machine on top of the police car, Bang, boom. And the street is a long, straight street. It's like a half a mile. So I'm shooting at them, and they're still I would say a quarter mile away, and I'm thinking this has the recipe, all the elements of a disaster. So I push my shotgun under a car, I mail my shotgun shells, I run up to these guys, I said, someone is bullshit back there. Gunfire, they said, we know we got the report, get out of here! And this is what I mean about defective thinking. So I go about 15 feet. And then I think, well, I duped them, you know. So I turn around and I says, you dumb guinea bastards, it's me! Here they come. Beat me senseless, as they should have. And so those were the circumstances under which I not only departed law school, but proved that I wasn't a very good criminal.
And end up in Iowa. I did want to ask you a little bit about that experience.
Yep.
You were there for how many? A couple of years?
Hard to tell, but I was there, then I was down in Mexico,
Yeah.
then I was in law school, then I was back there.
Okay, and you unofficially, I mean, you were both teaching and taking work.
Yeah, I had a teaching fellowship there.
Okay. And you were working on a novel,
Yes, sir.
which you finished, I think.
Yeah, it depends who you pay attention to. I mean, the thing about that novel was I sold it to 5 different publishers. Can't deliver the manuscript under those circumstances. Well, you're going to be revealed as a fraud instead of a blocked writer.
Okay, wait, so you sold it to 5 different publishers.
Yeah. Under different names, you know.
What was the novel about?
A buddy of mine got killed, and you know, we were drunks together, and I felt bad about it, you know. So I just I sort of followed the people around between the time that he got killed and the time they buried him. Just, you know, imagine what they were doing, because I was so drunk during the actual experience
Of his...
of the aftermath of his
Yeah.
death and so on. So I just sort of reimagined it.
And that was your last attempt at fiction as opposed to...
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I wrote a lot of poetry, but I think that's the only fiction.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to ask you about Murder One, which was I thought a great show, actually.
Thanks.
95, I believe. But what's interesting to me about it now is that it followed basically what they call now, I guess, serialized storytelling, which now with shows, and I don't know how much of television you watch, but 24 and Lost, I mean, this is now kind of a vogue practically, like, oh, we're going to tell a complex story, and it's not just going to be these self-contained episodes. Is that a sign that network television has gotten, the storytelling has gotten more sophisticated in itself, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it depends on the work. I don't think that any form, any approach like that predetermines the excellence of the material. But certainly it leaves open, I think, more the opportunity to go into characters in detail and in depth, and I understand that several of the contemporary series, explore the characters' pasts and so on. So I think that's all really good.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned character. I mean, can you talk about a little bit about?
I'm for it.
But when do you decide, okay, this is a character I'm going to spend time, like, do you know what I mean? What?
There isn't a character, I've never written a character that I didn't want to spend time with. And I don't think there's I was thinking about this the other day, there isn't an incidental character in Deadwood. Every character, I think when people see him, they know something about him and they want to find out more, and I feel the same way, and so, were you about to say something?
No.
No, you were just shifting your weight.
Yeah.
You have a bad back? My back is killing me.
Really? You mean like worse today than you?
I think didn't I bring it?
Fell.
See, that's why it's killing me. My pillow fell there. Uh-oh,
Yeah.
a note. Go ahead, read it. Take a picture.
I'm not, what time is it? I'm not wearing a watch.
It's getting a little late, don't you think?
8:45, okay.
It's 8:45.
You were talking about Deadwood.
Deadwood, for me, almost all behavior has to do with the way the individual bears the weight of his or her past in the present moment. And that's a continual revelation to me and to the character. And so, at one level, be accessing the past, having that as a resource is both, it's a two-edged sword because it runs so much of our behavior is distorted by the weight of the past on our present, and to the extent that you show the past, that you have easy access to the past, I think sometimes it diminishes one's appreciation for that theme as it governs present behavior. But anyway, the thing is, character is everything, for me.
Yeah, and I was thinking, like, you never use, Lost is a show that is about, half of it is about flashback. You never use flashback, right? I mean, the characters in Deadwood, we're aware of their past, but it usually comes out through sort of kind of tangential references or
Yeah, and I think
monologues or
it gives the viewer an opportunity to realize how difficult it is to gain. There's one character in there who seems only to gain access to his past when he's receiving oral sex, and I don't think that's an accident. I think a fundamental wound in his experience, was he was given up by his mother to an orphanage so she could go whore in the gold fields, and I think for him, the simultaneous victimization of a woman, and a gentleness to the woman who is victimized is a requisite before he gains access to the past in any way that's identifiable, although he's acting out of that woundedness every moment that he's awake. And those whores are all bought by him at the orphanage that he had been left at. And every one of those whores is thus his victim and he is rescuing. And I think that's how complicated his attitude toward women and especially his mother is.
So is that sort of your like when you're thinking about a character's past, inventing the character's past, you know it full well, you don't know it full well?
No, I just said he should be getting a blowjob.
We've already touched on this a bit.
You should be a disc jockey. You have a very sexy voice. Give me a piece of your barbecue and kiss me with your greasy mouth. That was was Joe Tex. That's from a song called Who's Gonna Take the Lady with the Skinny Legs? I'm sorry, go ahead.
So my question was, you've talked a bit previously about depression and dealing with it. You touched on it tonight. And, you know, I know from personal experience that's a really tough beast to wrestle with. So I was wondering, what are your techniques, or what have you accomplished so much?
I use a step over toe hold. No, you know, I pray, and I try to be among my brothers and sisters.
Do you feel that's something behind you at this point, largely?
Depression?
Where are you at with it?
No, I mean, you know, I try not to give it that much thought. You know, I mean, that's something which is, well, the simple answer is no, I don't feel it's behind me, but I don't, it isn't something that I think about in that regard. I know what I have to do each day, you know, to feel as fully human and to, so that's what I do. But I in no way mean to deprecate or diminish. It can be an absolutely incapacitating, you know, I've been in the dark room for days at a time, definitely. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I want to say hello.
Hello.
My name is Cindy Allen.
Hi, Cindy.
And my comment is twofold. Before I became a member of the Writers Guild, I was an actor, and I had the privilege of working on Murder One and Total Security. So I just want to say thank you for writing them.
You're very welcome.
And as a writer, people always say to new and up-and-coming writers, write what you believe, write what you know. How do you balance what you believe and what you know with what is sellable and maintaining work at the same time?
Yeah, you know, you can't. You just have to do the first and hope that the second works out. You know, Hubert Selby, who's a wonderful writer, said it's all either fear or faith. You know, and if you're thinking about what will sell, that's fear. And unless you write out, writing in faith is writing what you believe, writing what you know, writing. And I use those words, believing and knowing, metaphorically. It's writing what you're emotionally connected to. Not what you ascribe an abstract importance to, but you find, I think, if you stick with the material, that really what you're connected to is human beings and your memories of them and trying to bring them to life and or trying to imagine human beings you wish had been alive and if you stay with that, whether or not the stuff sells, I think you get to sleep easier. And the paradox is that's the stuff that usually does sell. But there's no guarantees. You know, the great paradox, not to speak of prostitution, you know, but they say that what makes a successful pimp is he doesn't need the product. And not needing to sell, I find, is kind of the essence of sales. I cleaned that up pretty good.
First off, I just want to say thank you for Deadwood.
You're very welcome.
Pleasure to watch it. I had a chance to go visit the set. I have a horse out in Armadillo, and a friend took me to the set, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that it wasn't bubble gum and Scotch tape. You actually built the damn thing.
Uh-huh.
And the question I have is the language. I love the language of these characters. I'm not talking about the cursing, but the use of metaphor and this kind of convoluted, wonderful way that they have of explaining themselves. How accurate is that to the time?
I don't know. I mean, you know, I have a conviction of my imagination, but the truths of storytelling do not depend upon a correspondence to an externally verifiable reality. They depend upon an internal emotional coherence. And if the characters are experienced as real, the way they talk will be identified as real. And so, which is not to say I didn't do research. I did an awful lot of research. I wrote, God help me, I wrote a paper presenting my sources, both primary and secondary, for where I came to, how I came to believe what language would have been used, not only in terms of the obscenities, but you know, to the extent that people were lettered in those days. They read a lot of Bible, a lot of Shakespeare. And so anyway, that's my answer. But mostly, because I try not to separate I try to write as the characters. You know, having done all that research, I try to forget it consciously and just think of the characters. And then each of them starts to talk the way he or she talks through the channel or the vehicle, or however you want to describe my participation in that process. To hear if he had come out of surgery. And when he came out of surgery and the doctor said he made it through, and then everyone says, oh, you know, they asked me to write that movie.
Seabiscuit?
Seabiscuit. And that movie was so, I mean, I'm sure it was a lovely movie, but you know, that wasn't what happened with that horse. None of that is what happened with that horse. And he was still a great horse. You know, it wasn't because the trainer looked in his eyes and he looked back and the trainer got a message, and you know, with that, and the reason I used the gesture advisedly, what the trainer did was stick an electric prod in his anus and electrocute him. And that's what made him a great horse, because he lived in terror that it would be done to him again every time he got to the place on the racetrack where he would be assaulted and the jockey whipped him. That's why he took off. The only reason I linger to explain that is the original trainer of that horse, who had been unable to do anything with him, was a guy named Sonny Jim Fitzsimmons, who was a great trainer, trained Nashua and a gentleman, and this other guy, it may be worth pointing out, the wonderful trainer that was portrayed by that actor. He was banned for life 9 months after Seabiscuit retired, because they found electrical prods, they found instruments of torture, you know, and stuff. But here's the point. Once the heart goes out, then the heart is capable of adapting. And when the word came that that horse had survived the operation, and now we wanted to feel, well, okay, at least he's going to live. And the doctor said, well, but the odds are he's not going to live. Because horses have been bred in a particular way for our pleasure, and they aren't built right. What looks like their feet aren't their feet, it's their toe. And the toe isn't meant to bear that much weight. But we bred them that way for speed, and so they don't have adequate circulation, and when their bones break like that, oftentimes what happens is they develop a laminitis or they founder. So maybe he's going to die. But knowing that, our spirits are still educated, and we still say, well, I hope the best for him. So what has started as an infantile fantasy has been complicated once the heart has gone out to be housed in something outside its own illusion of its separateness. It is educable. that's the moment that you were saying that you so appreciated, when those characters, she said what she said, he said what he said, and they're the great privilege of being present in spirit, even when you're not present in body. And once you realize that's a truth, that you can be present in spirit where your body is not, that opens up a lot of possibilities, folks. John from Cincinnati.
Two quick questions for you. Over here. Other side. You had said
Hello.
you had said that you had written a paper citing your sources about your language. Was it ever published? That was my first question.
I have made it available on the famous internet, which although since I don't know how to turn it on, you'll have to call. But if you call my office,
is it on the Deadwood site? Or?
I got only those. But if you call my office, they can get it through you through the Reboot mainframe.
Very good. The second question would be, outlining is very important for a lot of TV writers to plot out their season, and of course, on the micro level, to plot out one episode. Could you talk about what your process is? I know you live in the moment for dialogue and characters, but when considering a season in front of you or the map of an episode, how's that work?
Well, you say it's going to be tough. And we go to work on the first scene.
Can you map out an entire episode then? No? Not even a season, so you don't know who's going to live and die by the end of the season?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I knew at the end of this season, I knew what the culminating action was. We never got there.
And you do sort of think in themes, though, right? I mean, in terms of like, well, okay, I want to explore how the organism of the canvas will change this.
I know. Oh, in terms of themes or scenes? Themes.
No, themes. I mean, I'm thinking in terms of like where the season.
Well,
is going.
I mean,
I'm thinking, okay, what themes do I want to explore?
Yeah, I mean, I knew that I was drawn to. I could change the thing to Deadwood from ancient Rome because there were certain themes. I wanted to explore the theme of how we organize ourselves in the absence of law. And, that'll close in Philadelphia, but that was where I began.
Hey, you, David.
Hi.
I did your 3 or 4 week lecture series where you taught the Milch exercise, and we were supposed to check in, and I never checked in. Anyway, the project that I, about a year after I finished the Milch exercise every day, the screenplay that came out of that, I won Scriptapalooza, I won $10,000.
Oh, good for you.
But I didn't buy a horse.
You did not buy a horse. Well, so you didn't follow all the way
Yeah,
through.
but actually the reason I'm mentioning it is because it's totally transformed the way I write.
I'm so glad.
I mean, because I was a total procrastinator and perfectionist, and it totally overrided all of that. So my question is are you going to teach it again? Because it's just, or at least post it on the internet.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Because it's just the most amazing thing I've ever done.
Yeah, I gave a series of lectures after 9/11, and I think I might have done it here. And well, then I wonder why I couldn't find the goddamn thing. Because for reasons that I suggested earlier, it's very important to me to teach, I just it's hard to find the time, but I absolutely we have a big stake in sort of professional writers out here have a real stake in sort of, there's the walled city and the Philistines who guard the gate, and here we are on the outside, and that's all bullshit. That's all, we have a stake in believing that. And as soon as you take a certain kind of action, all that stuff falls away. It's like when I'm not writing, I think, what's the point? Hamlet's been written. When I'm writing, so the thing is, there are these exercises that one can do that sort of rewire you, and physical, writing exercises and so on, and those lectures are very poorly transcribed, but are available in your neighborhood Reboot or through at my office, you know. And then also, I hope this fall I'll give those talks again. Free, open to everybody.
Mr. Milch, I'm
Sir.
I'm just a dumb boom guy in movies and TV. I worked in the sound department as a day player quite a few times on Deadwood seasons 2 and 3. And I've worked with a lot of pricks in this business. And when I say pricks, I mean...
And am I the king of them all?
Untalented. When I say pricks, I mean untalented. But there are 3 people with whom I've worked which I was really in awe of. And you're one of them.
Thank you, I guess.
It was, I mean, just to be a fly in the wall, to watch you work, or hell, it's Deadwood, a fly in the horse shit. To watch you work, to learn from you. I mean, I learned more than 4 years at university. So I have so much to say to you and so many questions and blah, blah. I'm not going to say them, I'm just going to ask one question.
Okay.
Would you please publish a novel?
Well, I don't know, you know, I'm not the one to ask about that. Just that, you know, I try to sort of do the next indicated thing. And I hope that, you know, I've got 4 or 5 series that I want to do. As one said at a racetrack, one about the founding of the Johns Hopkins Medical School, and there's one called 6 Guys Named Gonzalez about these 6 Puerto Ricans that live on the same block and don't know each other. And the thing about me is I can tell anybody the premise of any series I'm thinking of because they're so stupid. Anyways, so I want to do those. I can imagine a set of circumstances where a novel about Deadwood, if it's in the Lord's plan, you know, that I get a certain amount of time, you know. But it's important to me to I want as many people as possible. I want to be in conversation through the world of the work that it's given me to do with as many people as possible. And so for me now, you know, I'm awfully glad to be writing in television, and not that I wouldn't write a novel, but you know, but I don't feel that it's a more sacred or resourceful enterprise or discipline than what I'm doing now. If you want to be the 6th person to buy my first novel. That's all right, sure.
I was just wondering what your rehearsal process is like. You mentioned rehearsal, and if you've ever done a rewrite after that or discovered.
Oh, all the time, sure.
Really?
Yeah, we all the time. And you know, and a lot of times I'll get an idea for later scenes in the rehearsal, or characters. You know the character Richardson, that moron that hangs around with Farnham. Yeah. He's just you know, I just used to see him on the set. You know, he didn't speak or anything, and I just you know, I like that guy so much. And a lot of the characters are like that, you know, that just sort of, or characters that you originally conceive as, that you don't conceive at all. You just see, like there's this guy, you'll see him, I think, in the 9th episode of this. See, we were just working on it today. He was, if you think Father Kaiser was ugly, this guy, you know, he's like 5'4", the poor soul. He's got neurofibromatosis, you know, elephant man's disease. And he's bow-legged, and I mean, he's butt ugly. And so I used to love to hang with him, you know, and I think, geez, I got, you know. So we were having this thing, in the 9th episode, there's a new character that comes to camp. He's a theatrical producer. There's a real guy named Jack Langrish. And he's about to open his theater, and in order to get people into the mood, he holds this amateur night where the people in the camp show what they can do to sort of make them more hospitable to the idea of theater. And so I'm talking to this guy, Jesse, and I says, you know, have you got like something because I don't want to make him self-conscious. I don't want to tell him, you know. I said, what, you know, is there some like trick or something you can do? And this will show you that a person can be ugly and a bore at the same time. He says, I have a rope making machine. So I said, that's good, but something that more involves, your own behavior of some sort, or he says, I can cry at will. I says, now we got a game. But I don't want him to have to speak because so I have him make a sign, can cry at will. And he holds it above his head, and that's his act at amateur night. So then there's another guy, Tim Desarn, that I always try to work with, and so I have him. So we got this guy there who can cry at will. So I say to Tim, go over to him and say, I couldn't cry for my father when he passed away. I will give you $1 if you can weep for him now. So now I have the kids. So we made all this up, sort of, we did that whole thing. There was like 200 people. We did it all without a script. We all just. So now I says, okay, pan away. Now you come back, and the guy who couldn't cry for his own man, he's standing there sobbing, and there's Jesse Mendoza who's crying at will, But then the drunk looks at him and he says, of course, it's easy for you. You didn't know the cocksucker. Bang! And he smacks him. I used to watch a $20,000 Pyramid, and for me, the best category of all was things that go inside other things.
One of the things I'm always struck by when I read anything about you or see your work is the breadth of references that you have, whether it's poetry, literature, art, or life. And I'm wondering, every time I sort of talk to filmmakers and they say, movies that are dark as anything, and I say, what inspired you most? And they say, The Sound of Music. And I'm curious to know if you have any particular inspirations, or if it's life more than art, or if it's a combination of things, or
everything. We were talking earlier today while I was boring the writers about, as an alcoholic, you always want to do the same thing every day, and if you fall out of your routine in any way, the temptation is to drink at it. Oh, I break my fucking shoelace. Now people wonder why I drink. So I'm always reluctant. Now I get on a subway in New York, which is a terrible mistake for somebody like me because all the logistics of it and the sounds and but anyways. So by the time I'm sitting there, I'm in abject misery on the subway, and my wife accompanies me because she knows that for me to be in any sort of a situation like that is fraught with peril. Like I went to the hospital over here the other day, a friend was ill, so now I park my car underneath the thing there, the parking thing. The garage. And now I come out from seeing my friend. I don't know where my car is. So I go up to this poor woman in the toll booth there. I say, do you know where my car is? She says, how would I know where your car is? I says, well, I came down here, and that's the last I know about it. So she says, well, have you got your thing there, your reboot, I says, I left it in the, I always leave my keys on the floor of my car. So she says, well, I guess you're fucked. I says, that is an insolent rejoinder. That isn't what she said, and it isn't what I said. I think she was polite and I was obscene. But anyway, so I wind up in customs. I wind up in the hands of the security force, which is what happens to me most of the time when I sally forth on my own. So my wife usually takes me if I'm not going exactly where I'm, supposed to be, if a driver doesn't take me, or my wife doesn't take me, it's very rare that I get where I'm supposed to witness this evening. So, anyways, so now I'm on a subway, and and there's crashing and the noise and the people, mainly minorities. That's tough for me, because I am a cesspool of prejudice. And anything that for an alcoholic, oh, well, it's because they're this, it's because they're that, and all it is because I'm uncomfortable doing anything that's not exactly what I did the day before. So I'm looking at, there's a black man with 2 black children. And I say, isn't that typical? So after I get over my outrage, I see that the black man, his eyes are set so close together, and he's not just cross-eyed, but he's amblyopic. He can't get, his eyes aren't coordinated. And I look at one of the little boys, and he's exactly like his old man. His eyes are exactly like his old man. And the other boy is normal in his ocular configuration. But I'm watching them, and the old man is talking to him in such an animated, loving way. And so now I get out of myself a little bit. I think, well, these miserable Negroes, look at that, they're happy, But I'm watching, and what I realize is that the father is explaining he's trying to explain the theory of relativity to his kids. And so what he's doing is, while the subway's going this way, he's walking backward and his 2 children are looking at him with such love and such fascination. And the combination of when an emotion gets you outside yourself, and that emotion is that the old man loved his children so much, and he didn't know where he was. He was teaching them, and they were learning. And I had the blessing of getting outside myself, even in my misery, in the subway there for a moment, and just participating in their lives. So everything inspired, as soon as I get out of the crippling illusion of my isolation. And what that involves is, if you have somebody kind enough to take you out like you're some creature, and sit with you and say, oh, they're not coming at you. I say, but they will eventually.
David.
Sir.
You have such a unique and distinctive personality.
Well, thank you, I guess.
How do you pick the writers you work with?
Well, mostly what I look for is someone who hasn't heard my stories before. No, I just look, I don't know. Obviously I appreciate talent, a love for, the human drama, an appreciation for the way people lie, But, and then, it's most, in addition to that, it's fortuity. I remember I met Regina, and Elizabeth brought Elizabeth, Miss Sarnoff, who was a producer and a writer, and who now writes Lost, and she brought Regina, and and I says, well, if Elizabeth likes her, she must be all right. And then I read Regina's stuff, and she was all right. I don't read submissions, from agents or any of that stuff. It's just people I run into. Sir.
David Raiklin, I'm amazed by your divine, all-encompassing vision, which you discover. How does music play in bringing your
That's what she was asking. I like the Beastie Boys. No, I don't know. I was listening. Kem gave me And now here's a term which you may not be familiar with, but I am intimately familiar with. He burned a CD. And I listened to it, and I heard of his favorite songs. And I heard one song today that was wonderful. And, so we're going to make that the theme from the new... I'll tell you somebody else, Ry Cooter, wrote the original theme from Deadwood, and we couldn't use it for... And he's such a sweet guy that even so he sent me... He watches the show, and he sent me a song, and I heard that, I like that. But I have no particular special... Who's that, Rufus? Yeah. Hey, Rufus! Okay.
Good. Just one quick question. I know how busy you are and everything, but I just wanted to know, like, what's David's downtime like? What you do with the family and the kids, when you're not so busy and not in the loop of everything?
I try and stay pretty busy because, even 7 minutes can get me into a lot of trouble. But we were just at Elizabeth's graduation. Our oldest daughter just graduated from college this past weekend, and my wife, without depending upon me, tries to make available all of the joys and blessings of family life, and it used to be she'd sometimes leave me with the kids for very brief periods of time, but that didn't work out. Once, I remember once she left, she says, I'm going for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. I says, dear, I'm perfectly capable. Go for several days for all. So she comes back 5 minutes later, and the kids have totally demolished. They've been drawing on these walls. It was Sunday football, and I've got huge bets on all these games and stuff. And they're right next to me. I said, they never left my sight. She says, but you never looked at them. That's how two things can be true and seem to be mutually exclusive. Yes?
Can you...
Oh, forgive me. Is this so that it can be recorded? I see.
Sorry. Apart from keep on writing, what's the best advice you give to writers?
Let's see. Don't let them catch you taking it. Oh, that's not the writers. That's something else. Henry James used to say, "Be one of those on whom nothing is lost." Everything around you, every moment, is telling you its story. You just learn to listen.